Okay, so you guys know I've mostly avoided controversy the last few months. Come to the studio, make you a lesson about something practical, show you some licks, break down a solo, but sometimes I gotta go off. And today the topic is frustrating comments I get too often from people who I believe have some basic misconceptions about drumming. And is this because I've gotten slapped down for making lessons about stuff like Buddy Rich or flurries? Maybe, but not principally. It's more like when I get a comment enough, I want to stop answering it individually every time and make a video that'll just address the entire thing. I did that with the whole "how come your hands don't look like Vinny" thing. So this one's going to be kind of a mop-up. Here now on 80/20, the 6 big things novice drummers get wrong about drumming. Stay tuned. And oh boy, am I courting controversy by putting a sponsor message here. But if you feel like you want to learn drums better, so link below, mini course from me, it's free. Support the channel by supporting yourself. Okay, sponsor message over. The first way novice drummers in my comments tend to get stuff wrong. They tend to overweight drummers who are supposed to be good and distrust their own instincts. Let's unpack that. Look, we all know that great drummers are revered for a reason. Steve Gadd, John Bonham, Keith Moon, Clyde Stubblefield, Mitch Mitchell, Ringo, Charlie Watts. Does that mean all of these drummers are 100% infallible? Of course not. Especially when you go back 30, 40, 50 years in the pre-click track era, there are a lot of drummers who are great because of their idiosyncrasies. And if you take something like the Porcaro Shuffle, that's a beat that feels amazing, right? But it's also really idiosyncratically Jeff. Meaning there are a bunch of different ways that could have been that all would have felt great. Jeff doesn't play the shuffle the way Bernard Purdie did. Dennis Chambers doesn't play it exactly the way Jeff did. So chiefly the way I see this era coming about is people starting with the drummer that we all acknowledge is great, and then working backwards from that to say, oh, where they place the kick drum is the only place to place the kick drum. Or the way they play ghost notes is the only way to play ghost notes. And we wouldn't do this for historical figures in other genres. We understand that people are human and that styles change. So the way this tends to manifest is that it makes any critique of admittedly great players just completely a non-starter.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
And I think we need to be able to say, player A in 1978 did this great, but player B in 1990 did it in a more technical way. And maybe you should pick and choose your approach. Anyway, that's the gist with number 1. Okay, the second way novice drummers in my comments tend to get stuff wrong. They overemphasize factors they can see and downplay things that might be more subtle or less obvious. So this is a subtle one, but it means if you've been playing drums for 2 years and there's something you can identify, like, does the guy keep his index finger out or does he pull it back? Does he have the fulcrum in his pinky finger or does he have it cleanly between his thumb and his index finger like a drum corps drummer? Is there a kick drum note on beat 4 of a Porcaro Shuffle? And that's all well and good, but a lot of times with beginners, don't pay as much attention to are things that they can hear as easily. And it's here where I'm going to be labeled an elitist. But for me, we'll just talk about me. It took me 10, 15, 20 years to start hearing the difference between my pocket and, say, Steve Jordan's pocket. But one thing I found when I posted the advanced drummers versus beginner drummer pocket lesson clip. One makes you want to tap your foot. The other feels less energetic. Was a bunch of people were like, why are you picking on these beginners? And I can't really tell the difference. And the whole point of that lesson was to emphasize, here are two drummers playing exactly the same beat. One's not a ton busier than the other. We control for audio. And still, I'm asserting there's a big difference between the advanced drummer and the beginner drummer. I can play all the same notes Nate Smith did, and it's not going to be quite as good as Nate, and maybe it'll be better than a guy that's only been playing for 2 years. But it's not about where my index finger is on the stick or exactly how many ghost notes I'm playing. And I see this in the comments a lot too when I do the drum covers and we talk about the sub score, which is like, how likely would I be to hire this person to sub? And everyone's always like, oh, but he didn't get all the ghost notes. It's like, no, but you don't understand. It's about the feel and the touch and the artistic choices. And these are all things that maybe, for me at least, it took me more years to hear. So takeaway here, be aware that there might be less obvious things that are equally important. And error number 3 from novice drummers in my comments. A certain subset tend to assume that if something's louder or has more notes, it's better. We'll talk about it. So this is kind of a different crowd than the people who make the last mistake, which is if somebody's playing a beat that's like, they're going to assume that's more advanced than someone playing a beat that sounds like. And I see this a lot with like Instagram drum fans. So let's just clear this up. Both are important. In the previous one, I was saying Nate Smith is better than guys who've only been playing for 1 or 2 years in ways that aren't totally obvious. But in this one, I'm saying even if Nate Smith only plays and his time and feel are great, he's better than a guy who plays. And his time and feel aren't happening that much. So we're trying to bring both sides of the equation in. Anyway, don't underrate somebody just because they're playing fewer notes than somebody else. Which leads right on to number 4. They tend to overanalyze or read too much into the way somebody's hands look if that person's an amateur or not a big name. And they'll tend to completely ignore unconventional ways of playing if that person's famous or a well-established drummer. Okay, number 4 was a revelation to me because when I got past 10, 15 years of playing, I started to notice that I was playing by feel more than by appearance when it came to my hands. And I could tell if something was relaxed. I could tell if my grip was tight or loose, et cetera, et cetera. I started using my ears. What I learned is I watched a bunch of great players, and a lot of them have very different ways they move their hands. There are guys that grip the stick from the back. There are people who use French grip. There are guys, I want to shout out J-Rod Sullivan, just because his hands look like textbook classical snare drum technique no matter what he's doing. Not everybody's like that. But one thing I found from internet commenters is if you're not a name, they're going to apply serious scrutiny to your hands. Like, oh, your left hand slicing, you're leaving an index finger out, using back fulcrum, something else. When if you just look at, and I'm not going to name any names, but choose your favorite drummer and look and see if their technique, possible exceptions, J-Rod Sullivan, looks 100% textbook all the time. End of the day, it's about the sound, it's about how it feels. But when they're looking at the supposedly great drummers, they'll excuse all sorts of weird idiosyncrasies. That's back to number 1. Okay, I think we've beaten that one to death. And 5, they'll tend to assume that there's nothing that doesn't meet the eye. I.e., if they can't hear it at 6 months or a year in, then there's nothing to worry about. I'll tell you why that's wrong. So 5 gets back to a lesson I made at the end of 2019, which was about, I think, 5 things that pros can hear but you can't. I made a jazz version too. I got so much pushback against that because people were saying, you're gatekeeping, why do you appoint yourself to be the arbiter of what's good and what's not? And I'm just saying, it all stems from this pervasive belief that if I can't hear it as a guy who's been playing for 6 months, a year, 2 years, then there's nothing else. And that's so not true. One of my jujitsu teachers told me the other day, he's like, you shouldn't only trust YouTube for jujitsu because you can't see pressure. And I think that's a great analogy. There are things that don't translate visually in jujitsu until you're actually in a match. And in the same way, there are things that don't translate until you get 5, 6, 7, 10 years in the game, drum-wise, and your ears get up to the level where it's hearing that stuff. Yes, there are things like pocket and groove and playing clean.
Ice cream Saturday, brunchin', lunchin'.
But there are also things like always being able to land on the one in a song, being able to size up a form really quickly and keep it in your head without getting lost. It's all that sort of stuff. And I don't think we'd apply the same sort of soft bigotry of low expectations to airline pilots. I mean, actually, some people would. They'd be like, let me in that thing, bro, I can fly it. But I think most of us assume that there's a muscle memory and a systems knowledge and a procedures knowledge. Why would we think it would be any different with music? Just because the drums are so literal, like, I hit makes sound. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and say that's wrong. You can call me a gatekeeper or whatever, bro. And finally, this is me punching back from where I live to where you live. They assume that anybody calling out the difference between good and not so good is arrogant or a snob or a gatekeeper. Oh, and number 6. Let's call out this meta of anybody pointing out that there's a skills gradient as a gatekeeper. I posted a little poll about this on my station, so I know that it's not the majority of you who think that. But gatekeeping is like saying, hey, there's a scarce amount of resources, and I'm going to be the single arbiter of what's good and what's bad in terms of allocating those resources. Where I really saw that was like with gig opportunities at physical venues in New York in the 2000s. And that's why I make so many videos that I'm so passionate about the internet, because anyone can just make a video on the internet. You don't need to book a gig and have a relationship with the club book. But what people miss in that is that you still have to be good. Like, anyone can put a video on the internet, but for people to view it, to get what you want, it needs to be artistically compelling somehow. I'm not saying everything needs to be technically great. And let me tell you where I agree with you guys. I think there are different definitions of artistic validity. I think you need to have room for both Ron Bruner and Charlie Watts. I absolutely believe that. I think you need room for Thomas Heike and also Bonham. For Matt Cameron and also Ringo. But I guarantee you all those people spent their Anders Ericsson 10,000 hours getting good at whatever thing they were trying to be good at. You don't think Charlie Watts played years and years and years and years of gigs with the Stones? Yeah, maybe he wasn't practicing his single strokes. He was practicing something else. But when people say there's no skills gradient at all, my usual retort is like, well, then why bother practicing? Why not just start identifying as a good drummer? It's like, you guys, I've decided I'm going to identify as an advanced drummer from now on. And then you just define advanced drumming backwards from whatever you are. That's a different thing. You're not throwing yourself at the mercy of the art and putting in the time to become good at the art in your own way. You're just making it about you. I think that's, I don't know. I haven't explored that point a whole bunch. Anyway, guys, hopefully I've gotten through to you on a little bit of this. Most of you, I know, are already the choir that I'm preaching to. I'm knocking on an open door, I get that. But from time to time, I like to rant a little. What are you gonna do? Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. That's well and truly how you get the gig. So guys, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, leave a constructive comment below. I'd love to hear your opinion. Also, if you'd like to get lessons like this every week, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and click the bell so you get the notifications every time we post something new. And just a reminder, if you'd like to actually improve your drumming, I have a free 3-video miniseries, which I don't share on YouTube, which you can get by clicking the link below the player and entering your email address in on the next page. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy these. See you again in another lesson of the week.